That's what I love to see. I like to see the beautiful faces. You know, it honestly, guys, when I'm able to see you, it makes it a lot easier to deliver content because I see you in the class, right? Versus when I'm performing to an empty screen, right? So I love it when you guys log on video. I'm gonna put on here gift of ship session 5. Pricing.
I think I'm finish every one of your recordings. I'm always eating.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, thank you for sharing and thank you for coming on live anyways. You know, that's what I say is that at the end of the day, it's funny because just like you're eating on my recording or on the classes that I'm teaching, I tend to have meetings with the region. And so I'm generally eating during those sessions, right? So that's my time to be able to have my lunch and learn. And so I know generally we would try to provide a lunch and learn option, and this is a little bit different, but hey, here we are, right? So today what we're going to talk about, and my apologies, you guys, because I realized that at the end of the last session, I didn't give you the pages. And there was quite a few of them, right? But what we're going to be covering today is seller pricing and staging strategies, which is tactics 7 and 8. If you're following along in the book, it's going to be starting at about page 135 through 166. So hope you guys might be, if you only ended up reading the next chapter, that's okay. The staging piece you can catch up on. That's one of the shorter chapters. But I want to make sure that I let you guys know kind of that area that we're going to be covering. And one of the things as we get started, you know, on page 135, it starts with a quote, and it says, "The ability to learn faster than your competitors may be the only sustainable competitive advantage," right? That may be the only sustainable competitive advantage. He says, "The moment the media declares a real estate shift, it's as if the market just got doused in cold water. The result is fearful buyers, pickier buyers, and eventually fewer buyers." And then towards the end, it says, "The truth is, the market remains full of people that genuinely want to buy and sell. The question is, at what price?" And so I want to talk about that a little bit, right? Because when we come into a market like this, it's really important for us to have an understanding of the market. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by having an understanding of the market? I'm actually going to share my screen with you. One sec while I load this up. Okay, so are you guys able to see this the DAOR page? Okay, great. So part of the reason that I wanted to share this with you is because in order for us to understand what's going on from a shift perspective and what our window of opportunity is, we have to understand how to analyze the data that's out there and how to share this with our clients, right? Because our clients are going to have questions. So we need to really be able to answer those questions and have that understanding of the market. This right here is essentially a historic count of sales by month. And we're looking at 2017, 2018, 2019, right? We see, and then looking at 2020. So we can see here January, February, March, and April, right? And we can see it start picking up right here when we get into March. And that happens across the board. So if you look at it in 2018, we went from, 22,125 sales in the month of January, right? That jumped up, and this is residential, so I will note that this is residential. That was at about 21,985 in the month of February, and then the jump here to 29,650 and then 29,458. I want to note that we tend to see that increase happen, right? We tend to see a bit of an increase happen as we start getting into the second quarter. Why? Is because of the activity that's happening 90 days before that, right? So let's look at 2019. Here we have 19,966 in January. That jumped up to about 20,000 sales in the month of February. That jumped up to 26,000 sales, almost 27,000 sales in the month of March. And then 29, almost 30,000 sales in the month of April, right? So we see it's growing as we get into that second quarter. Now, if we look at 2020, we have 22,000 sales in the month of January, still a little bit more sales in the month of February, right? It does jump up a little bit last month, right? Not as significant. We're at 25,765, and we are still in April. So this is the amount of sales thus far, right? But I want you to have an understanding of what the difference here is going to be. So I went back and I started looking at this data here because I wanted to get an average of the amount of sales that if we were on pace, where should we be at in the month of April? And so to do that, I looked at the amount of sales that tend to occur, right, within this 4-month period here, right, within this 4-month period here, and I looked at what that average is that we should be at, right? So in reality, I did it based on a 30 days, but if we were tracking based on the average sales from the previous months, if we were tracking, then there would be about 809 sales per day on the basis of a 30-day month, right? On the basis of a 30-day month, there would be about 809 sales per day. So what does that look like? So right now we are in day, and I did this a little earlier for you guys, we're on the 9th day of the month, right? We are on the 9th day of the month. In order for us to track, not even to account for the increase, but just to be average based on the number of sales that we're seeing in these past months, the number of sales we should be at right now on the 9th of the month is 7,281, right? 7,281, which means the delta, the difference based on the closed sales right now is about 2,319. Sales were approximately about 46% of where we should be right now, right? And so why do I share this? Is because we're starting to see the impact of what was happening in March, right? We're starting to see that impact. We're used to things increasing when we get into the second quarter, and yet we're not seeing that when we start looking at some of this data here, which I think is really important for us to have that understanding of, because this is going to really speak to what are the windows of opportunities we have right now when we're actually talking with our sellers, right? And that's not to say that, we're not going to see a pickup of activity. We need to make sure that, as agents, that we are getting into action very, very quickly. I'm going to jump over to InfoSparks really quickly because I want you to see the stats here as well. So this is new listings, right? This is new listings, and this is a 5-year historical look at new listings in the entire MLS, and we can also see it with the Downey Association. So I want to show you guys what tends to happen, right? Here we are. December always tends to see a big dip, right? So this is December, this is December of 2017, December of 2018. That is the lowest point of sales historically, right? Because we're on holiday, because we're taking vacation. A lot of people are celebrating, they celebrate the kids being off. So there's not as many closings generally happening in the month of December. That's historical data from the past 5 years, right? But then you see this, we start to increase. So we've got January 2016 bumps up, right? Now you have February 2016, you've got March, April, June is kind of this top point, and then we start to decrease a little bit. This is why from a seasonality perspective, we know that the second and third quarter tend to see most of the sales, right? Again, here we are, a big jump in January because everybody's doing their New Year's resolutions right here, right? And then you've got a big jump here in March, April, May, again, June, July, August, right? Before we start seeing that dip. Again, here 2018, right? We saw the biggest months in May. And then again, we see that decline. Now we're here in 2019. 2019 actually saw a little bit of a dip in February, right? But here we are again for March. Here we are for May. And this is pretty even across the board. So here's March in 2018. And here's March in 2019, right? It's pretty standard. Here's where we're at right now, right? December, January, that's pretty standard across the board. Here we are in February, and here is our dip in March when we're generally up here, right? So I'm just giving you some clarity on how we start looking at interpreting some of this data. This is just on the basis of new listings. So we know that when we look at this, our inventory is low, right? Our inventory is very low. We have about, in our association, we have about 380 new listings during this time, right? This is new listings specifically. And the board generally has about 2480, right? 24,080. Now, the same thing, we start looking at our active listings, we're seeing decreases here. We're actually going down, right? So that's limited inventory that we have here. And now we start looking at our days on market. So I'll note our days on market here are still pretty low, right? They're still pretty low. But where I want to go to is the closed sales. So again, you see these similar dips. Similar, we're going up, then we go down, we go back up, go down. It's pretty much, it's a very similar trend. And yet, again, here we are. January, March. This is our March, right? So the reason that I'm sharing this data, and I'm going to go ahead and stop share really quickly. The reason that I share this is because it's really important for us to know exactly what's going on in the market. That's not to say that there aren't new listings. There was about 170 new listings that hit today when I checked it about an hour ago, right? There was about 170 listings that hit today when I checked it about an hour ago. And so there's still business that's happening, and yet it's really important for us to have an understanding of the trends that we're seeing. You know, what are we going to be anticipating as we move forward, right? And what are some of the ways that we're going to be able to combat some of the objections that are coming up on this, right? What are going to be some of the ways that we combat some of those objections? And so on page 137, Gary talks about the window of opportunity, right? And here's the way that it works. You know, when we look at what's going on from a market perspective, he also shared a big thing that shows the conflict that always exists when it comes to real estate. It's, we have to be able to navigate between the asking price that the seller wants and the price that the buyer is willing to pay. And so he shares a really interesting story. He says, there's a bar exam and 3 would-be attorneys, they forget their pens. And so they ask the proctor who's going to be giving the exam, they say, hey, can I borrow a pen? And the thing is, he only has 1 pen, right? He only has 1 pen. So the first would-be attorney says, hey, I'll give you $1 for the pen. The second would-be attorney says, hey, I'll give you $2 for the pen. The third would-be attorney says, hey, I'll give you $3 for the pen, right? And because there's only 1 pen, the supply, and the demand is there's 3 people asking for the pen, he sells the pen at the highest price of $3. You know, word gets around, and the would-be attorneys that are getting ready to take the exam, they realize, hey, I need to make sure that I take a pen when I go. And the proctors all realize, hey, I should have extra pens because I can sell them to the attorney. So we get into a scenario where, again, there's 1 attorney getting ready to take their test, and they say, hey, I forgot my pen. Will anybody sell me a pen? And the first proctor, having heard the previous engagement, says, I'll sell it to you for $3. But now there's more supply. Another proctor comes and says, you know what? I have 1. I'll sell it to you for $2. And a third proctor comes and says, hey, I'll sell it to you for $1, right? Less supply, more demand. And so that's exactly what we start seeing in the market, is that we're going to go from a place where as the market continues to change, and I'll note, when we start looking at some of the new listings, we're still seeing lower inventory, right? We're still seeing lower inventory. And yet what we're also seeing is lower buyers, right? A less amount of buyers. And so that's not to say that, hey, we know exactly what's going to happen as the market starts to open up again. We may see more individuals wanting to start selling, and we may see inventory going up, right? And our goal is that you capture as much of that inventory, that market share, as possible. But he says the first time a buyer sees a property is our window of opportunity, right? Because it's the single best chance to create an impression that the home will sell. It's the best time that you can send that message that we're priced right because we're serious, right? Now, when somebody sees a home again and they're seeing that the price has been deducted, what is the thing that we think anytime anything goes on sale? It's what's wrong with it, right? Is there something wrong with it? Is there something that I should know about it? So I think that's really important for us to just have that understanding, is that we need to know that the first time a buyer sees a particular property is the best time that we can make the best impression. And so we really need to have an understanding of that from a pricing perspective and being able to communicate that to our clients, right? Being able to communicate that to our sellers specifically. Because the buyers, as they see what's going on in the market right now, as they're watching what's happening, they're thinking, you know what, I'm going to wait. And there's a couple reasons why they say they're going to wait. One is going to be because they can't move forward right now, right? That's the condition. But one of the objections we're going to start to hear, and I know some of you already have because I've been on the phones talking about what's going on with your clients, is they're saying, well, I want to get a great deal. Aren't the prices going to go down, right? Can I save money if I buy later? I want to be able to find that steal of a property. And that's what happens. It's about perspective, right? It's about the perspective and the perception that they have because of what they're seeing on the news, because of what they're seeing in the media. And so the biggest thing, the dilemma that our sellers have is to not chase the market. They have to understand that there's three real estate markets: a buyer's market, a seller's market, and a balanced market. And there's three pricing strategies, right? Three pricing strategies: price at the market, price behind the market, or price ahead of the market. And I'm gonna note, generally, we're only doing pricing strategies in two markets because a balanced market tends to move very, very quickly, right? A balanced markets don't stay around very long. Generally, we'll see a market go up and we'll see a market go down, but it's very rare that you see a plateau that is for an extended period of time. It's usually going to be very short-lived, right? It's going to be generally very short-lived. And we may be in that right now. So to kind of break that down, right, we've got about 2 months of inventory in Downey Association MLS based on what's active on the market right now and what is closing. And yet, so we've got about that much inventory in terms of month supply. That means we're still in a little bit of a seller's market. We've plateaued a little bit in terms of new listings that are coming on. So we're going to see us more than likely move into a little bit of a balanced market. And then what's either going to happen as we get out of, everything that's going on right now, is we're going to see one of two things happen. We're going to see a lot of sellers that realize, hey, I need to get on the market right now because now I'm in financial distress. Inventory goes up and buyers are looking for the best deal, right? Inventory goes up and buyers are looking for the best deal. And not only that, if we have fewer buyers because some are not ready, willing, and able, and inventory goes up, what do we have? Well, we have less demand for the properties that are out there, meaning that we're really looking at what is that cream of the crop on top, so that we're not chasing the market. And I'll note, for the past about a decade or so, as we've seen prices go up, it was very easy for someone to say, hey, let me go ahead and take this listing, right? And maybe that listing was a little bit overpriced or whatever it might be. We could look at the comps and we were able to, for a while, price a bit ahead of the comps, right? Because we were pricing ahead of the market. We knew that more than likely the market was going to catch up to us. That's not the case that we're in anymore, right? So not chasing the market means that we need to be pricing our listings ahead of it. If we price at the market, right? If we price at the market or we price behind the market, then what happens? Well, it means we're behind that opportunity curve. It means that property is likely going to sit on the market for a longer time period, which results in what? It results in price reductions, right? It results in price reductions. So successful pricing means getting the maximum price right now for a house. I want you to note on page 144, he's got a little bit of a table on there where he shows the price the seller wants in relation to the average home price and the time on market and when they're going to get it. right? And so we know that in a market with rising home values, if the seller wants a price that's ahead of the market may go up enough if it's attractive for buyers, right? In a market with rising home values. However, when home prices are falling, sellers are in a bind because pricing behind the market means they're going to be leaving money on the table for a quicker sale. But in a prices are rising. When prices are behind the market, that means prices are falling. So if they're priced high, too high, because they're priced behind the market and the prices are falling, they don't get to sell, right? Their property sits on the market until we get those price reductions. Because here's the thing is it's also understanding the perspective that the buyer has, right? The perspective and the buyer has. Now, I'll give you a scenario. How many of us, especially within the last few months, have had a buyer, right? We go and they fall in love with the home. And 8 other people fell in love with the home. And so it's a multiple offer situation, right? It's a multiple offer situation. And the buyer, starts saying, hey, well, I'm willing to pay more than what the property is listed for, right? I'm willing to pay more because I have faith that the values are rising. I have faith that the property is worth it because it's competitive, because there's one property and 8 people that want it. And so everybody's fighting for that particular property, right? Everybody's fighting to be the ones that is able to be the one that says, hey, now I'm in escrow with this particular property. And so they have faith that the value is what the price is listed for is the lowest that it's going to be listed for, right? And they overbid. That doesn't happen in a falling market, right? In a falling market, the perception that the buyer has is, well, prices are going to go lower and I don't want to overpay for a property, right? I don't want to overpay for a property. I want to get the best deal possible, right? That's the perception that the buyer has in a market shift, right? And I know that you guys are getting that right now because I get those phone calls, right? That those are some of the objections that you are hearing from your current buyers right now, right? Is the ones that are able, they're waiting, right? They're waiting because they want to make sure that they're getting the best value possible. Now, here's the other piece. He says on one page, Gary says on page 145, sellers also have a dilemma because in a falling market, it usually means all sellers are going to have to take a price cut. The market is getting ready to fall across the board. This is when anyone who wants to sell in a shift becomes very strategic. And yet all sellers naturally fear one thing. They fear underselling their home, right? They fear underselling their home. And that's the piece is time is not on their side. Buyers in a shift are shopping for a good deal. They're hunting for the lowest price homes. That means less than any other home. And so we, as if we're listing a property, we need to be out thinking and out strategizing the perception of the buyer, right? We need to be ahead of that, right? So that we can best support our clients, because if they chase the market, they're going to price correct. And if they don't price correct enough, right? All of a sudden they say, yes, I'm willing to drop my price a little bit. And again, the market is 2 steps ahead of them, right? Then it becomes they end up longer on the market. They have to continually do price reductions and they lose that opportunity on their home. They miss the window of opportunity. One of the pages that I do want to point out, page 146 and 147, it's going to look like this. It's kind of a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see that graph right there, which essentially is showing when they price and the market is down here, right? They do a price reduction to try to get to where they're trying to catch up to the market, and yet the market moves down as well, right? So they're following, they never catch it. The same thing when we look at the cost of overpricing a home in a stable market, it means at the end of the day, the seller hopes that an initial price will draw in a higher offer. The market interest is highest for new listings. As listings become stale, right? As listings become stale, when a property's been on the market for a while, it also reduces the saleable price because the perception is there's something wrong with the property, right? There's something wrong with the property. And so price reductions become necessary. Now in a shifting market, that's a little bit different because we know fair market value tends to decline in a shift. The seller hopes that a higher initial price will draw a higher offer, and yet market interest is fragile with high inventory, meaning they're not looking at that property and saying, wow, I like the pictures on this, you know, and the price is high, but let me go and see it and put in a lower offer. They're generally not doing that. They're saying, oh, you know what, that property, I don't want to see it. I want to go see these that are a better deal, right? They're looking for the 20% of the market that is the best property on the market. They're not looking at everything else, right? They're not looking at everything else, especially if things are overpriced. And if it's a falling market, a shifted market, and you're trying to do price reductions, if the price reductions are not big enough, you will never catch up to the market, or you never catch up to the market. That table right there on page 146 and 147, that particular table, I highly recommend that you take that table, right? And that you add that as one of the pieces that you go over when you're meeting with your sellers, right? That table is a great opportunity to present that sort of information and guide your sellers into understanding why they need to be priced where they need to be priced, right? That's going to be a really great visual to be able to show them. And so I highly recommend that you utilize that piece. Now, I'll note, one of the pieces where he talks about on page 150, there are two markets, right? And I don't necessarily mean the buyer and the seller's market. We know that in terms of what that looks like from an inventory perspective, what that looks like from a supply and demand perspective. But when you're talking with your sellers, there are two markets. One market where properties are priced to sell, and another where properties are priced to sit. We want to be of the group that's priced to sell. So the seller is really, they're either in the market or they're out of the market. And unlike a seller's market where you put a property and it's priced to sit, but the market catches up to the price, right? Because prices are going up. When we and pulls it back into the market, the difference here is in a downshift. Every day just pushes overpriced homes further and further out of the market. Right, so I want you guys to have that understanding, and there's going to be a great script on page 150 to share. I'm also going to be sharing one of the pivot scripts with you as well that kind of goes over a little bit on that pricing. So the first piece is having that understanding of the pricing, right? The second part is this, is that, you know, as we go into a market like this and listings come up, this is very much a skill set, right? Being able to understand pricing at a high level, right? Being able to understand pricing at a high level is a skill set, right? Being able to negotiate an appropriate price reduction, not only is the pricing element of that going to be a skill set, but being able to script, right? Using scripts to have a conversation with your seller that motivates them into a price reduction, that is a skill, right? That is a skill. Why do I say that? Part of it has to do with what is the expectation that we're setting at the listing appointment. We set an expectation at the listing appointment of what we're going to be able to deliver on, right? We set that expectation. It's one of the reasons that, you know, I've always recommended that I'm not the biggest proponent of it. There's two opinions on taking overpriced properties, right? If you choose to take an overpriced listing, only you can determine if you're going to choose to do that. Now, when you're a more seasoned agent, right? When you're a more seasoned agent, there's a couple different, there's pros and cons of taking an overpriced listing, right? A pro is going to be it's free marketing. Right? That's the pro of it. You take a listing that's overpriced, you get a sign in the yard, you get a little bit of that opportunity, but it's an overpriced listing. It's not necessarily going to sell. And yet we know that in surveys of top agents, they could reasonably expect to generate 2 buyers from every listing. So if you choose to take an overpriced listing, you really want to make sure that you have some type of plan in place to make sure that you're generating buyers and that you're setting an expectation of price reductions along the way. I would recommend in a listing appointment, if you know that you and the seller are not agreeing with the price, that you have a pre-signed price reduction agreement, right? A pre-signed price reduction with very clear terms built out, right? Very clear terms built out. So I'm going to note, the other piece is going to be, you know, when we get into our, I lost you guys on my screen. Give me a second. Can you guys see me? Can you see me? Okay, one second.
The picture.
Sorry, I think I had a weird connection. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys, I accidentally disconnected my other screen. So either way, we'll keep on going. But the biggest thing is that when we're negotiating any type of price reduction like that, right, is we need to have some type of pre-formed price reduction policy. It's very big on making sure that we're setting that expectation with our clients beforehand, that we know what scripts we're putting in place. You know, how many times are we having a conversation with our client around you know, the actual price reduction itself. And I would know in a time right now where we're in any type of shifted market, or anytime we're in, for example, right now is a very uncertain time from a perspective of pandemic. I think there's a lot of value in having a predetermined set phone call with your clients, right? Now, I would have, in a different market, might have recommended that be something that's done weekly. In a market like this, I'd say it's great to have it 2 to 3 times a week, right? Where you're checking in with your clients to give them an update about what's going on. That's a perfect time to set an expectation for a price reduction, right? To set that expectation for a price reduction is at the listing of it. Hey, Mr. Seller, you know, when we list your home, we're gonna have a predetermined call time, and that call time, we're gonna be touching base 2 to 3 times a week, right? On, let's say it's Monday, Thursday, Sunday, or Saturday, right? Whatever dates it is for you, Monday, it could be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And during that time, we're gonna do one of two things. We're gonna go over, you know, what activity we've gotten on the listing, and I'm going to advise you and potentially request that we reduce the price, right? If you set that expectation at the beginning, right? And that's not gonna be the exact script, but that's essentially, that's the meat of it, right? Is that we wanna make sure that we're requesting that price reduction in advance. If you set that expectation, now when you actually call and advise them that maybe a price reduction is in order, that's gonna be a lot simpler, right? To potentially get that, right? And so I think that's one of the things that's gonna be really important. You have to decide for yourself if you want to take a price reduction or not, right? That's gonna be, I'm sorry, not a price reduction. If you wanna take an overpriced listing or not, that's a personal decision. I know some agents that are of the opinion that, hey, I don't wanna take an overpriced listing that's gonna sit on the market and I'm not gonna get, you know, any sales from it. I don't want that to decrease my average. It's really up to you. If you're newer in the business, we'll see a lot of agents that, you know, are taking it because it is a marketing opportunity, right? And I highly suggest you work on your skill sets when it comes to pricing. And I'll go over that script in a little bit. But the first piece I wanted to go over is on page 156, there are 7 maxims for pricing in a shifted property, right? There are 7 maxims for pricing in a shifted market. 1, be a student of your market. Know your numbers. Be a student of the market and know your numbers. So why did I show you some of the graphs at the beginning is because I want to start giving you an understanding of what you should be looking for, right? You should know what the average days on market are. You know, has that changed in your particular market, right? And if it has, what does that tell you? What can you infer from that? Number 2, focus your main comps on actives. Pendings and solds may already be out of date. So this is different from the way we usually do our comparative market analysis, right? When we are in a market that is going up, I can look at the sold activity from the last 320 days or so up to 6 months. I generally don't like to go more than 6 months, right? I can look at what are the most recently sold properties. And in a market that is rising, I could say, okay, the average price point is $525. And I might even be able to get away with pricing it at $530, $540, $550, right? In a rising market, right? In a rising market. However, if we look at the market right now, what are we seeing? We're seeing appraisals come in lower, right? We're seeing appraisals starting to come in lower from a price perspective. And so when we start looking at pricing in a shifted market, I don't necessarily just want to look at the solds. I want to look at the competition that your client is working against, right? If there are homes on the market that are very similar to theirs, and those homes are all priced 500, 550, 525, 530, right? I want to be the lowest priced home. I want to be the lowest priced home so that I'm not chasing that market, right? Is at the end of the day, because we know we have to be the great deal that the buyer is perceiving that they're going after, right? So we have to have that work with us. Number 3, be a student of properties. Preview them so you understand what is selling and why. And this may be virtually previewing them, right? This could be virtually previewing them right now, but we want to have an understanding of the properties that are selling and what is not moving. And we want to really understand why. So it's really important that when we start looking at some of these things, that we're asking that question of ourselves, that we're being critical thinkers around what is the data telling me. I never look at data and say, hey, this is exactly what's going on. I may see jumps in a particular area, and you need to go back and have an understanding of, okay, what happened here? What happened here, right? So what is this telling me? What was the activity looking like before this? What was happening? And we'll see that that's one of the reasons that when we look at the market as it exists right now, I'm not necessarily so much looking at March numbers, right? Because I know March numbers are based on activity from 45 to 90 days ago. I'm anticipating what's going to come in the next 45 to 90 days, right? Because that's what the numbers tell me. So it's really important to be a student of the market and a student of the property. Number 4, keep your presentation as current as possible. Let your ongoing research do the talking, okay? Let your ongoing research do the talking. So I'll go into this a little bit more. If you go into the listing presentation that is in KW Command that's built for you, there's a couple pieces that are really important on there. There's things that are what we call evergreen, and evergreen items. What does that mean? Evergreen is something that, you say it today and that is going to be the same information that you're sharing tomorrow. It doesn't change, right? It doesn't change. And yet the current data are going to be things like the market snapshots, right? The market snapshots. That's why when we look at the listing presentation that's available in Command, it has the ability to pull in the most recent market neighborhood snapshots for the particular property that you're selling. That's why it's not that you have one listing presentation. It's that you have one listing presentation that you customize for each client. The same way we customize a comparative market analysis or a home value for our clients, we want to customize some of the neighborhood statistics. If we're using any of this data, for example, the days on market, the close trends, we want to make sure that's custom and that we're keeping that piece as current as possible for each client, right? We want to pre-qualify the motivation to find the sellers who most need to sell, right? Because we know that the sellers who most need to sell most often, right? So we want to pre-qualify the motivation. Price ahead of the market. Number 6, price ahead of the market to avoid chasing it. And number 7, always secure price reductions in advance to avoid falling behind the market. Any questions before? I'm going to show you guys a script that I think is going to be really important, and I'll be posting this script as well. But while I'm getting my screen shared, any questions that you have? And feel free to drop it in the chat. Can everybody see this? It says pivot, shift ahead, pricing in a shifted market.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this script I'm going to be posting for you guys. This is a new one because, again, remember, as much as there is a ton of pieces that are extremely relevant from the Shift book, this book was written in 2009. So there are some scripts in here and there are some tools in here, and yet there's also some pieces that you have at your disposal that I want to make sure to share, and I'll post this sheet as well. But essentially, it's pricing is about positioning in the market. It's not about what you think the home is worth or what your client wants to sell the home for or what anyone else says. It's about what the market shows at a specific point in time, and what a ready, willing, and able buyer will pay, and what a motivated seller will accept, right? That hasn't changed. That's pretty much been the same thing that we've seen. So we're trying, it has to be about having a three-pronged approach to selling. Number one, like I said, we need to research and interpret market data. The numbers tell the story, and we need to use our skills to understand the number and tell the story that best helps our client achieve their goals. So staying educated on current market data, using the market snapshot specific to their neighborhood. That's something that wasn't available to us in 2009, right? Because you can have data that is zip code specific, and that's what you're gonna find on, you know, realtor.com, Zillow, Trulia. Primarily a lot of what we look at in terms of the MLS, we're primarily generally looking at more of a zip code, right? Or of a city. We want neighborhood information, right? What is the average days on market, average home price? We want to know some of the things that are available within a market snapshot. You want to utilize that, right? Utilize that information because it's hyper local. It's what the neighbors care about. And it's the best way for us to differentiate between why the property that you're selling is different from the property that's 4 blocks away in a different neighborhood. And yet they think, well, it's close enough. It's less than half a mile. So isn't that similar to mine? Why can't I price based on that? And yet we know that we have to be pricing based on neighborhood data. Communicating value to sellers, grounding the transactions in the truth. What does that mean, right? Is we don't make the market, right? We don't define it. Anything that we say about the market, this is when someone says, well, I could sell your home for this price, there's no guarantee there, right? Because that's a statement, that's an opinion, but that's not reinforced in truth. We can only sell the home at what the market is willing to pay for it, right? And so we need to be very, very skilled in interpreting that data, and we need to be very skilled in be able to presenting that. So leveraging, in this case, Leverage Commander or what you're using, but I mentioned the neighborhood snaps and the listing presentation specifically. Also the campaign, so that they're getting up-to-date information about what is selling in their neighborhood, right? If you have a seller, 100%, even when they start to sell with you, I would not remove them off of the monthly neighborhood nurtures or the biweekly neighborhood nurtures. And if they're on a monthly one, I'm gonna reset it to biweekly, because I want them to consistently see what they're competing against in the market, right? And then be prepared to listen. So this one is gonna be really interesting, you guys, is we are in a face-to-face conversation with our clients. And so it could be very easy when we're in a face-to-face conversation with our clients to be, they call it sensory acuity, but it's essentially being present to some of the things that are changing, right? So we know that when we see a certain facial activity, let's say a client that, you know, all of a sudden their lips tighten, right? Or they have a semi-frown or their brow furrows, right? That's cues for us to anticipate that they may not be understanding or 100% in alignment with what we're saying. And it's not necessarily for us to interpret it, it's for us to dig in and ask more questions, because we have those cues because of what we're seeing, or a change in voice, right? Or a change in tonality. We can generally hear those things, we can generally see those things. And so that's one of the reasons that as you start doing presentations and you're doing them virtually, which is definitely an activity we're gonna see increase right now, that's one of the reasons I always say I love being able to see your guys' beautiful faces, right? It's also because I'm gauging for understanding. I'm gauging that, yes, you're getting what I'm saying, right? And so the same thing with your clients is you're gonna wanna ask questions, you wanna listen. If you can get them on video with you, that's gonna be infinitely better, right? But you also wanna make sure that you are paying attention to some of the vocal cues, right? To some of the vocal cues. And that may not be something someone says, that may be the tone in which they say it, right? It may be the tone in which they say it. And so we have to be very, very much attuned to that, so that we can continue to communicate the value and make sure that there's an understanding and they're on the same page, right? And so that we can clear up any concerns that come up. And then evaluating and planning a pricing strategy. So we want to share how supply and demand affect the market, as well as how it affects the buyer thought process. One of the scripts that's really come around this is, you know, whenever I would do a listing presentation, one of the ways that I would start with my clients was I'd say, look, Mr. Seller, I 100% understand that you have an emotional attachment to your home. And I really want to invite you to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer right now that maybe doesn't have the beautiful memories that you have in your home, right? That has never seen your home, is looking for other places, is looking for where they can create memories for themselves. And I just want to invite you to put yourself into their shoes, right? And that's part of where we start getting them into the buyer thought process, right? And so then we have to have that understanding of the same thing when we're showing supply and demand. It may be, hey, Mr. Seller, you know, when you see, when you go to the store and there's a sale, you know, what do you usually think? Or if there's a big clearance, what do you usually think? Right? And what do we tend to think? We think, well, they're lowering prices. Maybe the lower prices more. Is there something wrong with it? Right? Is there something wrong with it? Why is it on sale? I will tell you guys this, anytime I love sales, but anytime I look at something at a sale, I'm looking to make sure there's not damage, or whatever damage there is not crazy, right? Because I'm already we're pre-programmed to think that if something's on sale, there's something wrong. And so from a buyer's perspective, we want to make sure that the seller has an understanding of that, right? They have an understanding of that. Using shift tactic number 7, which is what we're going on right now, is just gilding your knowledge about pricing. Explaining them that the first step into the market is crucial. So making sure that we're explaining that window of opportunity to them, right? That window of opportunity is that when we first get into the market is our biggest opportunity to create an impression and get viable buyers to buy your home. And in a competitive market, we need to be the first ones if there's limited buyers, if there's limited demand, right? Meaning that we don't want to compete against everything else that is looking like it might be a better deal than yours. And then also practicing handling pricing objections and role playing, right? So these are going to be some of the scripts for seller objections that are on here as well. Number 1, I'd rather try a higher price now and adjust later. So I will say this, I've heard this script before. I'm guessing many of you have as well, if you've gone on any listing appointments at any point ever, right? Is generally we tend to hear this, is even though they want to try a higher price because they feel like they can adjust later. And so a script here would be, sure, we could do that and it might work. But what if I present you with 2 options? A very slim chance to get that highest sales price, a very likely long-term on the market, and the stress of having to keep your home in magazine-ready condition all the time. Or B, a really good chance of getting maximum fair market value for your home, doing it in as little time as possible, and minimizing the stress that comes with selling your home. Which would you prefer? Right? We need to get them into that. It's emotion that makes people think. So giving them the idea of very long time on the market and the stress, right? And the stress that's associated with that. Or do you want a really great chance of getting fair market value? You know, doing it in as little time as possible, minimizing the stress that comes. Which would you prefer, right? We ask yes or no questions when we are anticipating an answer. Objection 2, our house is unique and worth more than the other homes. I'll note most sellers feel this because, again, this comes back to the emotional connection they have, especially if they've invested in doing upgrades over time without really understanding, you know, that some upgrades may not be as beneficial or as value add as they might anticipate. What is one person's treasure could be another person's trash. You know, I'll give you an example, you guys. When I was younger, my mom loves Mexico. She loves going to Mexico and seeing the beautiful restaurants with all the beautiful vibrant colors and the beautiful haciendas, and that, she loves it, right? Her home is very colorful now. And we lived in a house in Bellflower, and she decided she wanted to paint the entire house, right? And I promise you guys, I lived in a home that we used to joke that we were living on the inside of a piñata, because she painted the colors of the walls in all different, brand new paint, right? Brand new paint. And we had red walls and we had yellow walls and there was blue walls and the ceiling was a different color and the trim was a different color. And you went into every room of the home and it wasn't just that the entire room was blue. It was, okay, you'd have a blue wall here and a red wall here and a yellow wall over here. And it was beautiful. It was very colorful, right? And it was to her taste. And it was funny because she painted it with the anticipation that we were going to stay there. And in fact, the next year, my parents decided that they wanted to, there was a beautiful home that became available in La Mirada. And so the next year we moved. The next year we moved. And yet that's an upgrade, a nuance of the properties. You can look at that from the perspective of a seller, what was just painted, brand new paint. Brand new paint. It's only a year old, right? The entire home is painted. And the perspective of a buyer that is like, I hate these colors, right? I hate these colors. And so that's one of the things that we really want to communicate to our clients is that every home is unique and we agree. So that's the script here is, yes, I completely agree that every home is unique. And that's why we adjust for the nuances of every property in the pricing analysis, right? I see John is laughing at the story. Yes, 100. I swear, if I had pictures, I would show you guys. But we adjust for the nuances of every property in our pricing analysis. The challenge we face is that most sellers want to price their personal preferences and sentimental value into a home. The challenge is that buyers haven't made those memories yet and filter their decisions through their pocketbooks. We need to be positioned where your home is most appealing to the greatest pool of buyers, and that's pricing ahead of the market. Don't you agree? Right, that's pricing ahead of the market. And objection 3, we want to wait until the summer or fall to list because, or insert whichever, right? Summer, fall, winter, spring, after COVID, everything, right? Is we want to list because prices will be better then. Scripts, if you have a real need to wait, say you're not moving for 6 months, that's one thing. But the thing with waiting is this, future markets are more uncertain. The other thing to consider is that markets shift quickly. Appreciation happens gradually, but downshifts happen suddenly and many times unexpectedly. Listing now and pricing right is the safest bet to get the results you've told me you want, right? Listing now is the safest bet to get the results you told me you want. So I would post this. Are there any questions on this before we move into tactic 8, standing out from the competition? Questions or just comments? No, okay, awesome. So let me get into this next piece here. So again, right, pricing is that first part that we want to make sure is really important. The second part of this is going to be staging, right? Now, one of the quotes he starts off here on page 157, he said, opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work, right? Which could be true about what we're doing now, right? Opportunity is missed by most people. And it's because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like worse. That's by Thomas Edison, right? And so one of the things that is really important to have an understanding of when it comes to pricing our property is that we also need to make sure that in addition to pricing, that we're standing out from the competition. And there's going to be a couple ways that we do that, but the number one way to do that is actually through staging the property, right? It's about the visuals. We want to make sure that we have great photos, great marketing collateral, but that we're also able to stage the home because we want to dress it up for success and we want to highlight its assets. So one of the things that he says, especially in a shifted market, right? We should never think of asking if we should stage. We simply need to question how we should stage, right? Because staging is the essential part of the marketing process. It can entice buyers to take a look and perhaps get hooked on a home, right? And perhaps get hooked on a home. So no, not everyone is very visual, right? Not everyone is very visual. I said the other day we were talking about motivation and somebody said, how do I visualize success? And I said, look, for me, while I can put things together from a design perspective, I'm one of those people who I have to put it on paper. I need to look at pictures, right? Get ideas. I love grabbing magazines and kind of cutting out and figuring out my color scheme or the things that I want. And yet for me to 100% visualize something can be a little bit difficult for me, right? And that's always been something for me. Well, there's a percentage of your buyers that's what they're seeing, right? They see something and they don't necessarily see the potential that comes with staging a property. And so when they don't see the potential or it's not as enticing to them, we get less eyeballs, less exposure. And we know the more eyeballs we have on a property, the more exposure we have on the property, that's really going to differentiate it from the competition. Now, staging can be a bunch of different pieces, right? Staging could be adding cost-effective amenities or improving the condition of the home. So cleaning the home, right? Painting, potentially, floor treatments, any repairs, because now the home becomes more valuable in comparison to the other comps of the property, or the house can get moved into a higher price range, right? Because of that. Now, the thing about it is this. Not every time are we going to have the ability to do full-on staging, or are we going to have the capital? Because staging does essentially take a bit of an investment. And if it can move you into a higher price bracket, that may be something that you want to talk to your clients about, right? Maybe something you want to talk to your clients about what the options are, right? Sometimes this is not going to be, fully hiring someone to do staging. In fact, right now, it might be doing virtual staging, right? Right now, that might mean doing virtual staging, which is definitely an option that we're going to start seeing more and more with what's going on now. The other piece of this is it might mean that we're cleaning the property, right? It might mean that, and this could be a number of things. This could be giving your clients advice on how to clean the property and getting it ready for showing. I'm going to give you a note here. Some clients can feel very touchy if they feel like you're criticizing their home, right? And that could also mean if they feel like you're criticizing their ability to clean their home, or how they choose to maintain their home, or how their home is decorated, right? Or if you feel that it's cluttered, right? And you're trying to give them advice on that. So a recommendation that I have around this piece, and I'm more than happy to share what I had. So part of my pre-listing packet, when I would take a listing, I want to say it was about a 1 to 2 page guide that was on things to do to prepare your home for sale. And it included minute things like wiping the walls, right? Wiping the walls, because we know walls can get dirty, right? It had things like making sure that they clean the glass, right? It had things like trimming the hedges on it, right? It was a breakdown room by room with a checklist of the activities that they should do to prepare their home for sale. And then there was a secondary checklist of what they should do during the showing, right? Which is things like, I don't know about you guys, but we tend to not want the seller to be there when we're showing property, right? Because we want to make sure that we're able to control the conversation and guide the clients or the potential buyers into potentially making a purchase. And so there was a guideline for that. Instead of outright saying, hey, Mr. Seller, we don't want you to be here because we don't want you to accidentally say something that, could hurt the sale, it became a showing guide, right? This is what should happen. And if you are there, then we ask that you not be in the same room, or kind of not, allow the buyers to look on their own. And so why is that important? It's a lot less emotional for a client if instead of telling them and them feeling like it's very personal, is if it's, hey, here are my recommendations, right? Here's a sheet with all of my recommendations of what I, how you prepare for your home and et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot easier when they've got a checklist that they can walk through, right? And I know some clients, some agents will go and they will help with the sale, right? They will help with the cleaning. I know agents that have gone out there and have trimmed the lawn, right? Because we want it to be as presentable as possible. That's up to you, but all of those components are going to be part of staging, especially when we're in a buyer's market. When we are in a buyer's market, it is 100% a stager's market. He says on page 161, buyers are looking for a great deal, so the homes they choose must look like a great deal. Buyers are looking for great value, so the homes they'll choose must look like a great value. The home must look like it's worth and what the seller is asking, because a seller will not get a second chance to make a first impression. You can only make the first impression one. And now in that type of market, sellers are in competition with more homes than they care to count, and they want to come out on top, right? So we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves in the right way. So on page 163, right, on page 163, they actually go through a chart of the buyer experience determining the staging priorities, right? Determining the staging priorities. And so when somebody goes into an internet listing page, when they go into an internet listing page, what is the first thing that they're seeing, right? One, we want to make sure that they're looking at curb appeal, the curb appeal of the property, right? So there's generally the first picture we always see is the picture of the front of the property on the MLS, right? What is the next pieces that are most important for them? It's that entryway, the kitchen, and the master bedroom and bath. Those are the most important pieces, which means as well, guys, if you are doing a virtual tour, I want to highlight this piece, right? Is if you're doing a virtual tour, is what are the most important things that the client is going to see? What we know to be true is that the kitchen is actually one of the most important pieces of a property that the client is looking at. So it's interesting here, but curb appeal, entryway, kitchen, then master bedroom, then living areas, then other bedrooms, and then the backyard, right? If we're trying to keep their eyeballs on things for a longer period of time, might it be important for us that we follow the order of what's most important to most buyers? That might be a way to you know, when you're doing any type of virtual staging, when you're doing any photos, this is one of the ways that you actually want to organize your photos on your listing, right? Because that's part of it, is we're cultivating the buyer experience, right? We're cultivating the buyer experience. We're guiding them through the home. And now each moment they stay because they see things they like, they're more likely to stay longer, right? They're more likely to stay longer with it. And so that's going to be really important. But curbside appeal is going to be very important. We want to make sure, you know, lawns are trimmed, hedges are trimmed. I've seen where when the grass is really dried out, that somebody will come in and do, I've seen people put in, you know, new grass, or put in some type of different, you know, front curb piece, whether it's those rocks that I've seen for some properties, but it's just making sure that there's great curb appeal, right? How does the property look at the beginning to entice more individuals to potentially come into the property itself? So that's going to be really important. And then they give the 3P, the 2F formula, right? Which is prioritizing these 5 things when you're looking for quick cosmetic improvements in a listing for sale. Number 1, plantings. So the plants. Number 2, paints, right? Number 2, paints. Number 3, pictures. And then on the 2 F's, number 1, fixtures, and number 2, furnishings, right? Now, here's the thing. When I say pictures, what does that mean? Plantings, paint, pictures, fixtures, and furnishings. If a buyer is walking through the property and they want to envision themselves living in that home, right? And they want to be able to envision themselves living in that home. And so they see it and they see the beautiful plants, and they see, you know, the property has been painted, it looks great. And now they see all of a sudden the pictures is of some other family, right? There's wedding pictures and kids pictures. Is we get taken out of that reverie that we have in our head of ourselves living in that property, because now we remember that someone else lives there. That's not my home, that's their home. And so the photos actually make a difference. And that, again, that's something to include in the guide that you give the clients, and you want to explain that to them, right? Is that it's not about, you know, stripping them from the home. It's about making sure that the buyer can see themselves there. The buyer can see themselves there. Fixtures, the fixtures are going to be things like, you know, making sure that, you know, if the fixtures match, they're clean, right? Do they look okay? I mean, something as different as, I've gone into homes before and seen, you know, where it has light fixtures and there's 2 different types of light bulbs, and it just looks, it doesn't look as clean, right? It doesn't look as great. And so little things like that can be tweaked. Remember, you don't have to be the one that makes all the recommendations. I'll give you something else that I know a couple agents in our office used to do as well. Part of it, when we look at staging and we're trying to move the emotional aspect from it, there's a couple different opportunities you have. You could hire a stager, right? You could choose to hire a stager. You could choose to hire virtual staging. And yet, if that's something that financially you're not there yet, then the other thing I used to see was there'd be two agents that would potentially partner together, not on deals, but to be each other's stagers, right? And create that perception, because we're not the prophet in our own backyard, right? So our clients, maybe it might feel a little bit easier if it's coming from a second party when you're giving the recommendations. And so being able to be a recommender for somebody and say, hey, I'm going to bring somebody in, they're going to take a look at the property and they're going to give us their recommendations. You already know what all the recommendations are going to be. You already have that. But when they feel like it's coming from a second party, right, they're not feeling as emotional around the recommendations, right? And so definitely there's a couple different options there. If you have somebody on your team that is dedicated to that part, you know, as well. So there's just a couple options when it comes to that piece. But at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that we are pricing our property and really understanding our market, being able to communicate that with our clients. And second, that we are being competitive in terms of what does the property look like, and is in the property the best condition possible for us as we move forward. That really closes out, you know, this section. Are there any questions? Any, you know, I see a bunch of these. I know we went over time, so I see you guys still on. Thank you. Are there questions that you have? Are there, you know, objections, any ahas that you've got, or action steps that you're going to take based on what we talked about today? No action steps, guys? Ahas? I hear somebody's, their phone is having an aha over there. Awesome. Any challenges that you guys foresee, or anything that you want me to kind of re-look at?
Oh, sorry for the ahas. My thing was on mute and I was talking. Don't mind me.
Oh, no.
But I just wanted to say that I think looking at the market and like really doing a market analysis was like a huge aha, just being able to speak to the market shift itself. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. We call that the language of real estate, right? Is we have students of lore, the language of real estate, right? Especially in a market like this, because it gives us more insight into how we communicate with our clients as well, right? The more you know it, the more confident you're going to feel when you're talking about it.
Definitely.
Awesome. And then right here I have James. So you said the repeating the how to overcome the objection about the market. So there's a couple different ones. There was the rather try a higher price now and adjust later, which essentially was, you know, presenting them with two options. One, a very slim chance to get that high sales price, a very likely long time on market, and the stress of having to keep their home in magazine ready condition. And number two, B, a really good chance of getting maximum fair market value for the home, doing it as little time as possible, and minimizing the stress that comes with selling your home. I'm going to be posting that. I will post that in the files as well. And that piece is called, it's Pivot Script Pricing as well. So I will make sure to share that, but thank you for that question as well. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys for staying on with me. I know that, you know, we went over time a little bit today. What we're going to be talking about for our next session on Tuesday, so you guys have some time to read it. If you didn't reach this last session, there's some time to catch up. We're going to be covering pages 167 through 196, right? 167 through 196. And it's going to be session 6 is going to cover buyer reluctance, right? Buyer reluctance, which I'm sure we're seeing a little bit of that right now, right? So we're going to go over 4 strategies to overcome buyer reluctance, the why wait chart, and the idea of trading up in a buyer's market and how to show that to our clients as well. But awesome, you guys. With that, thank you for joining me. If you missed anything at the beginning, I will know I showed some stuff on info sparks off of the MLS. So if you missed that portion of it, there was some really good information there just to kind of give you insight and to help you to think through how to present some of that information to your clients. So again, if you didn't get a chance to see it, I do recommend watching the first part recording on that, and it's available in the Facebook. And I see you guys saying thank you so much for coming on, and I will talk with you soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Monica.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a good day as well.
Have a great day.